I told you in the last video about this Phil Haney guy. I've got more on him, and there's something incredible, a speech that he did that you just got to hear about. Stay with me, folks. Hey everybody, this is Deb with Truthification Chronicles, and oh wow, I started digging into this guy, and oh my goodness, this Phil Haney, somebody you really need to know about. Now this is not a picture of him, okay? But this is a podcast that was done by this Shea guy that you really need to hear, and probably it may have been one of his last things that he did, because this was January 28th. He might have done something in February, but he was a very brilliant man, and he studied Arabic culture and language, and he worked over in the Middle East for a while, and then he became one of the first members of the Department of Homeland Security when it was first formed, and just an amazing man here. He also worked as a customs and border officer. He dealt with agriculture. This guy had so many talents and knowledge about so many different areas. Well, anyway, here's this podcast. I got to tell you, I haven't heard much of it because I got focused on something else, and that's what I really want you to focus on. I mean, I'm going to leave this down below so you can check it out if you've got time and you want to do that. But I highly recommend the one I'm going to show you in just a little bit. This right here is one of the tweets by someone who knew him. My friend Phil Haney was found shot yesterday in California. I had lunch with him a month ago. He warned something could happen to him. He was to get married in a month. It will be falsely called a suicide. And this was a thing. This guy, he had a wife that he loved dearly for, many years. And then she passed away because of cancer. And then a year later, he was ready to marry this other woman that he'd fallen in love with. And so he was excited about that, according to his friends. And they said he really has everything to live for, so he would not take his own life is the issue. And he even said it's going to be falsely called that. Well, I'm not saying one way or another. I know that this person then ended up, Jan Markell, she actually ended up deleting this tweet. So I don't know why. It was ruled a self-inflicted wound, and that's the official statement right here. But my question on this is, how fast do you do something like that? I mean, just because you find a body and there's a gun laying next to it, then you assume that it is self-inflicted? I'm not so sure, but it seems to me like it was very fast. And see, they found the body on the 21st, and this is dated the 22nd. And how would they have enough time to do like an autopsy and everything on it? I just think that it's really strange that this happened. I've heard that there was a gunshot wound in the chest, and some have said in the head. I think it was in the chest, but it's really just kind of interesting that they made this decision so fast. And if it was, in the chest, that might be a little suspicious. Also, it says he was 66. Someone in my comments from the previous video said he was 72 or something like that. I went to Wikipedia to try to find out. He's not there. Yeah, there's no entry for this guy. And so, I don't know. This was the official statement. This is something from one of his friends. And I tell you, this is a really good write-up to find out who this guy was. And, this guy actually knew him. They'd spent time together, and he's not buying it for a minute. He says, don't believe it for a minute. So, he's questioning what happened. Definitely. And all of his friends who knew him are questioning this because he was a Christian man. His faith was very important to him, and they can't imagine that he would ever do this, especially with his upcoming marriage. So, yeah, I'm going to leave the links to all these down below. They'll be in the description. You'll have to click like the little triangle or something to make it pop open so you can see them, but they'll be there. And some of this is from like 2016, 2015, so you're just going to have to keep an eye on it. March 1st, 2016, Judicial Watch had this about Homeland Security records reveal officials ordered terrorist watch list scrubbed. And this was the guy who was the whistleblower for this. Now, he mentioned a lot of things. Judicial Watch has gone through and they have verified most of what he said because they've come up with FOIA requests and got the documents to prove it. So here's another article on it. This one's from Wired. FBI purges hundreds of terrorism documents in Islamophobia probe. Yeah, this was, I'm telling you, friends, this is big. Again, another one I haven't listened to. And the reason I'm including them is because I seriously got going on the one that I'm going to show you in just a minute here. And I was going to listen to it at double speed, and I was so absorbed I went back and I started it all from the beginning and put it on regular speed because he talks kind of fast and he puts out so much information in that short time that I wanted to absorb as much as I could. So I didn't get to these others, but they're, foundational too, and I can't imagine that he would say much different in them than what he said in the other. But this guy was trying to blow the whistle and tell some very disturbing things that were going on. And this is something that I wanted to point out to you. This is from PJ Media, and it came out back in 2016. But, we didn't have a lot of the pieces then. And now we're starting to put more pieces together and see things in a different way than we did then. And this stuff is starting to really rise to the surface and come back around again. And this was one of them. Clinton Foundation employed a now imprisoned senior Muslim Brotherhood official. The Muslim Brotherhood plays a huge role in what this Phil Haney did, because that's what he was trying to warn about. All right, so this is the one I really want you to go watch. It's an hour and so long. The speech itself is probably about an hour. The rest of it is, there's a little bit of question and answer at the end, but I'm telling you, again, I started out watching this double speed and I had to go back and I said, no, this is too important information to go at double speed. This has to be done slower, and I need to really be focused in on it and see the examples that he's giving. He has documentation for everything. He really does. And supposedly he has given it to Congress. According to this talk, he had already given it to Congress at this point. Now, I don't know who he gave it to, but I've also read somewhere that he gave it to some members of the Freedom Caucus earlier, just recently, like within the last month or so. And so that's why some people think that maybe he was done away with. And, it's suspicious, let's put it that way. And the timing of it is, I don't know who in the Freedom Caucus. I did not see any documentation of who, but I did see that they said he had a meeting with them and that he gave them all of his information. Now, I also saw in some of the links that I read that he was in the process of writing a book and that his publisher has part of the book, but not enough to put out without the rest of it. And all of his notes and his documentation and things that he was using to write that book, they've disappeared. And so they're not in his house and nobody knows where it is. And so that, again, very suspicious. Kind of happened at the same time he went missing before they found his body. So I just can't imagine. You're in the middle of writing a book. You've got part of it to the publisher. You've got an upcoming marriage. Yeah, that's not a guy who does himself in. I don't think so. Anyway, this particular video is from September 6th of 2016, Act for America conference. This Act for America is an organization. This is what their mission statement is, they say. It's to educate, engage, train, and mobilize citizens to ensure the safety and security of Americans against all threats, foreign and domestic, while preserving civil liberties guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution. Now, I'm not familiar with it, but it's a conservative group. That's for sure. The lady who started it, this lady's name is Brigitte Gabriel, and she is a Lebanese American conservative author, anti-Islam activist. Now, you'll notice that they call her an anti-Islam activist. Now, here's what I think is really odd about this. I know Wikipedia is very left-leaning. I understand that, folks. But I wanted to see what they had to say. Well, look at this. It says, this biography of a living person relies too much on references to primary sources. Wouldn't primary sources be good if it's a biography of a living person? I mean, isn't that kind of where you want to get the information from, primary sources? It just seemed really, really odd. And of course, because she's a conservative, the neutrality of this article is disputed. So, yeah, they've been, going off on that. But anyway, she had a really horrible upbringing. And when you read this, she was born to a Christian couple during the Lebanese Civil War. And they were attacked and they lived in the basement of the house, an 8 by 10 foot space. It was a bomb shelter for 7 years with only a small kerosene heater, no sanitary systems, no electricity or running water, and little food. She said she had to crawl in a roadside ditch to a spring for water to evade Muslim snipers. So, it sounds like really a tough upbringing there. And because the Muslims were kind of attacking all the time. Well, and that's why they consider her anti-Muslim. Well, she probably has very good reason to be. Anyway, so you can read through. I'll leave the link to her bio down below. But in the course of the talk, this Phil Haney was mentioning how we have the Muslim infiltration into the United States. Now, this shouldn't be a surprise to you if you watched this episode of my Louis Gohmert series. And by the way, if you haven't seen the whole thing, the Louis Gohmert series is excellent. He had like a 48-page document that tells so many things about Robert Mueller that you really need to know. And Robert Mueller had a part in this. If you understand the information from that video, then as it goes into this talk here, you'll understand better what he's trying to say, because he's revealing how the Muslim community has been trying to set up an infiltration of the United States to take down our government. And it appears that this has been going on since the 2000s, like 2004, I think he said, when it first started, or that they first noticed it. And then it really gained speed when Obama came in, because there was a case right before that was about the Holy Land Muslim organization. And this was pivotal in what happened, because from that point on, when Obama came in, he started purging all negative responses, all negative information, comments, even vocabulary having to do with anybody Muslim. And it was amazing what was happening. I think personally this is probably what Flynn was seeing, that there was this resistance to see any bad in anything Muslim. And so it's not necessarily an anti-Muslim thing, it's anti-Sharia law, because the Sharia law is the pivotal issue that has given them a foothold in the United States, and it's what they want to implement. So they actually use it to play off of liberals and their perspectives and sentiments.
Why are they doing this? And how did we get to this point where we are today? Isn't everybody curious? How did this all happen? Well, I'll give you one clue. It didn't start with 9/11. It started it's described what the intentions of both the progressive leftists and the global Islamic movement, whose strategy is to implement Sharia law. Ironically enough, you can find the motivation in those red words right from the Declaration of Independence. And that is that they seek to alter or abolish this current form of government. The Founding Fathers wrote this in a benign way to encourage us to stay engaged in our government of, for, and by the people. But the progressive leftists want to either alter it, hope and change, or have allied with people who want to abolish it completely, because according to the self-definition of Sharia law, it opposes all forms of human government. And that includes the U.S. Constitution. There are no exemptions to this dynamic, to this force of gravity that keeps all of the planets in the Islamic solar system orbiting and in place. So that is where it comes from. And if you build your rebuttal and your strategy on our founding documents by recognizing what they intend to do, which is to alter or abolish our current form of government, it puts you on a solid foundation, immunizing you from a lot of charges of Islamophobic, racist bigotry, because after all, you're defending the documents that our country was founded on. Who is seeking to alter or abolish the U.S. Constitution? Well, let's start with this document right here. Some of you recognize that this is the explanatory memorandum. Up at the top is the word Al-Qaeda in Arabic. Highlighted in the blue box is the phrase that I wrote in English, Al-Qaeda al-Mutsima al-Islamiyya. That was written by the Muslim Brotherhood 10 years before any of us ever heard of Osama bin Laden. Al-Qaeda is not an organization, it's a concept. And it was formulated and crystallized by the Muslim Brotherhood here in the United States as early as 1987. The observant Muslim base is the reason for civilizational and/or settlement jihad. That is why they are immigrating to America, to come and coalesce into one solid unit with the intention, and it is intentional, to implement Sharia law, which according to Islamic theology is the grace and gift to mankind. They do not see it as an imposition, but they're not coming here to learn to like hot dogs and apple pie either. It's intentional, based on this concept of the Al-Mutsima, Al-Qaeda, the observant Muslim base. And you can see it in the English portion down below, and that it was authorized by the Shura Council of the Muslim Brotherhood. Within the Islamic, especially Sunni, Salafi, pro-Sharia, pro-Jihad world, the Muslim Brotherhood was founded as a revival organization, Al-Arab Al-Arabiya. That's what Arab Spring is in Arabic, and it doesn't really mean exactly what we think of when we say the Arab Spring. It actually means the revival of the Arab people, as it's characterized in the Quran, that they are the best of all people. And everyone that was a leadership position in that movement in the Middle East said so. All we had to do is listen to what their intentions were.
So again, this is such an excellent talk. I can't even summarize it because there was so much meat in here. And he goes through, he lays his case all out. He goes through a timeline, and I highly recommend it. Okay, anyway, so speaking of Muslims, this is why when Pompeo was picked, and I didn't really realize this at the time, that Mike Pompeo was not something that the liberals wanted to put in there because they considered him anti-Muslim. And I guess I really didn't know that, but yeah, they were kind of arguing that Mike Pompeo has long worried Muslims and human rights groups for his sweeping statements about Islam. In other words, he told the truth. Yeah. And there have been rumors for months that Trump would do what he did Tuesday, fire Rex Tillerson, who was a globalist. I'm surprised he was even in there, and replace him with Pompeo, which we know was part of the plan because they had to put him in CIA first before they could put him in here. So, this is the thing. And they talk about the Boston Marathon bombings in 2013. They could have been prevented. Phil Haney is convinced that that incident could have been prevented. And also the San Bernardino shooting. I mean, he says so much of it could have been stopped. A lot of things that we've seen in the last few years. And they wouldn't let him. And they wanted to stop people like him who were trying to blow the whistle, who were trying to expose the truth. They didn't want that. So here they were talking about, as a lawmaker, Pompeo co-sponsored a bill to ban the Muslim Brotherhood. But look at how it defines it. An Egypt-based Islamist organization that conspiracy theorists on America's far right have accused of plotting to infiltrate the government. Yeah, conspiracy theorists. Right. When you listen to that talk, you'll understand he's got the documents to prove it, that it's true. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's reality. So that one, and then this one, because they were trying to get rid of Pompeo because of his record. And by the way, just in case, the people that were really yelling about him were Democratic Representatives Keith Ellison and Andre Carson. Andre Carson's from Indiana. Not around here. I think he's from Indianapolis area. Are calling on Senate Foreign Relations Committee leaders to oppose the confirmation of Mike Pompeo as Secretary of State, citing his, quote, history of anti-Muslim sentiment and discrimination. And guess what? Ellison and Carson are the only two Muslim members of Congress. Keep in mind, this was before the 2018 election, okay? And Carson served on the House Intelligence Committee with Pompeo when Pompeo was a member in the House. So he knew Pompeo's stance because he had served with him. So they were concerned because Mr. Pompeo will regularly be required to liaise with Muslim leaders and Muslim communities abroad, especially during this time of conflict, tension, and unprecedented humanitarian need throughout much of the world. Oh, yeah. We need a credible Secretary of State, not one hobbled by a history of anti-Muslim sentiment and discrimination. Yeah, and there's the letter if you want to even see it. But anyway, so again, I'll leave the links down below. I thought you'd want to know that. So it kind of really puts out there that Pompeo is knowledgeable about the real threat. This is a huge threat. When you listen to the talk by Haney, you'll understand it better, because this is a major threat that we all need to be aware of. And it did not just happen under Obama. It started before that. Something that you definitely need to be aware of. Here's another talk. Again, I've only heard parts of it, but this is Michele Bachmann and Phil Haney being interviewed by Jan Markell. And this deals with more of the spiritual issue of it, because as I look at things from a biblical Christian perspective, I know that the end times are going to happen as the Bible has said. However, I believe personally that the election of Trump gave us a little buffer time, a little bit of a reprieve, as it were, in order to set this up so people can see clearly the difference between good and evil. That way, when the tribulation comes and the end times, people will have a definite view of good and evil, and they'll understand they have to make a choice. So the choice will be much clearer, I believe. Anyway, all of this, I think, is fitting into a spiritual battle that's going on. And right now, especially with the denigration of the Christian faith, and if you notice in our society, you're much more accepted if you are a Muslim anymore than if you're a Christian. And the problem with that is Muslim from its start is really based on the conquest of the world. And if that conquest requires swords, so be it. If you watch the very first of his speech, you'll understand he lays that out at the beginning, because the symbol that they have really does tell you what their plan is. And that's to dominate the entire world and to bring it all under Allah, because that's the only way of bringing peace to the world. And if they have to do that with the use of their swords, they will. So I think this is kind of interesting, and I'm anxious to hear more of it, to find out exactly where they're going with it, to see how they perceive this connection to the spiritual realm with this particular battle that's going on. But anyway, I think this entire thing, you need to really listen to his speech. Some of these others that I've given you, if you've got time, go ahead and listen to them, because I think that there's so much information out there that this man had, and now we don't have him anymore. So we need to take advantage of what we do have, what he was trying to tell us, because he knows what he was talking about. When you listen to him talk, you'll understand. I thought, okay, he's an old guy, this is going to be boring. No, oh man, it was very engrossing. He hit very important points, and it brought you in, and it's like, wow, I didn't know that. Oh, there's that. And just so much. I could have listened to him talk for 2 or 3 hours, I'm sure, because he had so much to convey. And anyway, so I do want to go and listen to the rest of this. I had all of these that I wanted to listen to, but like I said, I got so engrossed in this other one, and that's the one I advise you start with. So anyway, all these links will be down below. I know I went through a lot of it, but my suggestion is listen to that speech. That is the most important thing to hear. So anyway, that's what I've got for you on this one. I want to thank you for stopping by, and I'll see y'all later.